In a world where humans are forged into gods among men, where robots can go rogue and spell the destruction of entire civilizations, where old gods have been chained by mortal masters, and where your very shadow can be turned against you, Warhammer 40k covers almost each and every genre or subgenre of fiction you can think of within the bounds of its universe. Like D&D or Star Wars, it's a massive sandbox with room for everything from a noir detective thriller to massive awe-inspiring wars of the gods to the very silly whatever the Orks happen to be doing at the moment. So it won't be surprising to learn that Warhammer 40k finds itself at varying points intersecting with a handful of different literary punk subgenres, from cyberpunk to biopunk and even NASA punk. Welcome all you beautiful ladies and animals. Today I invite you to join me as I explore the exact intersections between my two favorite hyperfixations, punk and how it shows up across the many factions of Warhammer's grimdark future. Not into Warhammer, not big on punk? No worries, I've covered both topics in great detail before. You'll find playlists linked below and up in the corner. But we'll also do a quick primer before diving into how these ideas blend together through design, storytelling, and all that good stuff. As always, if you like this and want even more, subscribe to the channel so you're not missing out on anything else. And very quickly, let me introduce you to the sponsor for this video, me! Hello, dear traveler. Did you know you can support what I do here on the channel and get some snazzy, fantastical prints all at the same time? If you go to the links down below or that bubble somewhere up there in the corner of your screen, you can find all of my merch collections, which have their proceeds, profits, words donated directly to charity, specifically my local food bank and or the Trevor Project, depending on what it is. All you have to do is go down below, look at one, find one of the designs you love. There's a lot of great ones. A lot of them I wear all the fucking time. Why did I do this? It's fucking hot in here. It's like a sauna. Who the fuck's ideal? But with many thanks and everything else taken care of, let's get into the video. At its core, Warhammer 40k is a sci-fi universe set 40,000 years in the future, where everything has gone terribly, hilariously, apocalyptically wrong. It's a setting where there is only war, endless galaxy-spanning, mutually assured destruction, war, and where hope is less of a theme and more of a sick joke. If you want more on grimdark as a genre, I made a whole video diving into that here. But to explain briefly just how bad it can be, imagine Star Wars had a baby with Doom and Dune, and then raised it on a steady diet of heavy metal album covers, religious fanaticism, and existential dread, with just a pinch of political undertones from the UK in the 90s, and even still to this day. Our primary protagonist faction is the Imperium of Man, which is a totalitarian nightmare made of failing bureaucracy, space Catholicism, and giant walking tanks. The galaxy is full of hostile aliens like the flesh-hungry Tyranids, the ever-wawing Orks, and the sleek anime-adjacent Tau. And then there's chaos, basically hell in space, powered by your emotions and constantly trying to turn you into goo. Being turned into goo, of course, the most merciful thing that they'll do to you. It started as a tabletop war game, but 40k has expanded into novels, video games, animations, memes, and now you guessed it, YouTube essays about punk aesthetics. In the most broad sense possible, think of any sci-fi story you've ever read or seen, and to some extent, it's here. Aliens that want to eat you? Yes. Dying gods and robots older than the Earth? Yes. Terminators? Yes. Horrors from beyond the galaxy that want to devour all living life? Yes. Super soldiers who are so advanced that they get removed from their humanity? Yes. People having their souls digitized? Yes. If you've thought about it, seen it, there's a good chance that any sci-fi trope you can think of relates back to a faction of Warhammer 40k in one way or another. Now, before we tie this mess of horrors into punk, let's go over exactly what punk is. punk isn't just about the mohawks and the safety pins and the people who smell like hot leather and spite. Though yes, those are involved. Punk at its core is rebellion. Rebellion against systems, expectations, the future, the past, the machine, your parents. The genre itself doesn't really matter. If it exists, punk has probably screamed at it through a distorted amp. But punk isn't just a music scene or a fashion choice, it's a lens, a way of looking at the world and saying, this is broken and I refuse to pretend otherwise. Now, take that idea and slam it face first into science fiction. That's where we get all those wonderful subgenres: cyberpunk, biopunk, diesel punk, solar punk, clock punk, nanopunk, and whatever else the internet decides is punk this week. Each one is a remix of that same core idea, resistance paired with aesthetic and narrative, style with spite. Normally, the foundation of all these punk genres is made of a technological aspect. Said technology lays the foundation for a cultural aspect. Then, the punk comes in as a rejection of that culture. Like steampunk, the technology is steam-powered early industrial machines, with clockwork gears, coal chutes, and child miners. So it very often gets tied into things like Victorian England and the culture that is derived from there. Then, the punk comes in as those who are opposed to that very culture and rebel against it. The technology is just a background for the world to exist, but the cultural and societal issues is what makes it punk. Simplifying this with an example, if you've seen it, Arcane isn't steampunk because magic and clockwork machines. It's steampunk because there's this extra layer of classist warfare going on that inspires the actions of our characters who either stand with the status quo or violently against it. Or take cyberpunk. It's not the neon or the cybernetics that make it punk, and the hyper-capitalist nightmare, that's just dystopia. What makes it punk are the rebels with mohawks, malware, and moral grudges, the digital samurai who look at the system and say,
"We have a city to burn."
So if 40k is a giant melting pot of genre chaos, it's only natural that punk and its many messy subgenres have snuck into the setting in ways that may not be immediately obvious. In fact, I'd say that Warhammer 40k sets up its very own unique style of punk that, like the many different sci-fi tropes it jams together, blends all other dystopian punk genres together into one. Don't worry, I'm gonna break it all down, but just know, punk isn't just about studs and sneering. It's about fighting back, breaking the format, and telling a story from the gutters, the fringe, or the parts they tell you not to look at. And even though it may be framed by a technology that isn't exactly the sole kind of tech you might find in any given sci-fi punk universe, it's never quite so black and white. Now, starting strong, from the valiant space marines to the towering Imperial knights and back down to the humble guardsmen, the Imperium is a patchwork of war machines stitched together by bureaucracy and belief. If there are two main systems in any punk genre, that's the system and the punks who fight against it. In 40k, that system would actually be the Empire of Man, which stretches from each end of the Milky Way, domineering ever more. One way or another, every other faction in 40k, with exception of maybe the Tyranids, operates how they do, based on the current status quo of the Emperor's rotting, dying empire. Off-rip, I'll reiterate a point I've made a few times now in different videos, and say that the Imperium of Mankind, on an aesthetic level, fits very broadly diesel punk, a genre defined by the hyper-industrial and war-torn landscape of Europe in the early 20th century. With that focus in on fascist ideas and ideologies empowered by the new and destructive forces given to mankind by the wartime industrial revolutions we saw a lot of between the world wars. Now, in the context of Warhammer 40k, there's not that many punks within the Imperium, but it does exist as what would effectively be the final boss of diesel punk. So what I'm saying is, yes, Mr. Horus Heresy is the galaxy's greatest punk, but the Imperium isn't fueled by diesel, which again, most of the technological identifiers we see in punk subgenres is less about the literal fuel itself, but more so The cultural and societal foundations that are established by the tech, enabled by the tech. It doesn't matter if your brutalist, hyper-factorized, World War-adjacent fighting force has their tanks powered by a nuclear generator rather than raw gasoline, it still fits the bill of dieselpunk. I mean, Wolfenstein is one of the prime go-to examples of dieselpunk, even though it has elements of nuclear and space-age technology too, but it doesn't make the rest of it any less valid. The brutalist architecture, the blend of gothic statues and city-spanning, smoke-billowing factories is what makes the Imperium's fascist society dieselpunk, specifically the authoritarian side of dieselpunk, with those who become disillusioned with the system, such as renegades of the Guard or heretical Astartes, those who abandon the Emperor's light for the Tau, or others who may rebel from the system in various ways. These are the people who become punks to the Empire. In many stories, the biggest rebellion from the Imperium is rationality, especially with how paranoid and irrational they can be. Sir, with all due respect, we just bombed a city of loyal citizens. There were kids down there, priests, even a bakery still working.
Yes, very tragic. But consider, guardsmen, that one of them might have been thinking about heresy.
Thinking?
Exactly. You see, heresy begins not with action, but with doubt. And doubt, my dear Creel, spreads faster than plague in an Nurgle cult's footlocker.
But they were loyal.
Ah yes, loyalists, the most dangerous of all. Heretics are obvious, traitors are predictable, but loyalists, they let their guard down. That's when the rot sets in.
So the plan is to kill everyone before they can betray us?
Now you're catching on. Provocative purification. It's called preventative exterminatus. Very fashionable in Ordo Hereticus circles.
You're insane.
Insane? No, guardsman. Efficient. Now grab your las gun. There's another settlement 30 clicks west. One of them once talked to a Xeno in 875 M39.
Sir, that was 3 millennia ago.
Yes, and I don't intend to let them do it again.
In a more classical sense, we've established the Imperium is a dieselpunk dystopia, but what really makes it punk, if anything, are the cracks in the system and the rebels who live in them. Those who leave the Imperium entirely and renegade against the God Emperor, or the fact that the Imperium itself is a system built upon the corpses of worlds for the galaxy, for the universe to rebel against. Yes, the Imperium are the bad guys, and in this framing, what I'm going to call warpunk, they are the said system, the societal fabric by which the rest of the universe has to play by and deal with. The technology that fuels this regime? War. War is not diesel, war is not atomic energy or green energy or steam energy. But it is an idea. It's a strategy, a methodology, and a framework by which all of Imperial society runs on. In this way, everlasting war in the Warhammer universe is the technology that frames the societies of the galaxy into the best, most efficient warmongering faction in all of 40k is humanity. They cover the most ground, they pick the most fights, and they leave no stone unturned in the pursuit of using war against their enemies. Now, if the Imperium of Man is the grandest, greatest regime across the stars, which imposes its great control and sets the system of war that affects the rest of the universe, how do the other factions fit in? Well, they're all different styles of war with different flavors of punk working against this carrion empire. From the forces of chaos, anarchist punks who want nothing but absolute collapse of the system, to the Tyranids, the biopunk swarm who seek to assimilate and replace the galaxy with a system of their own. The somewhat NASA punk Votann who use a set of rationalities and trade routes to keep their goals of merely exploring and keeping themselves alive. Every faction of 40k reflects this technology of war in opposition to mankind, creating a systemic foundation of punks. So let's break it down. As the resident resistance group in 40k, chaotic forces in the Milky Way wage war because that is what the universe demands. Humanity rages war, so the universe, like a mirror cracking under the pressure, fights back. It is the literal and metaphorical inversion of humanity's wars turned on itself. So literal, in fact, that chaos used humanity itself to split the Imperium in half. Using the adept warfare of the Astartes and the Primarchs, but in defiance of the Emperor's vision, makes for what we see in Horus, the disillusioned anarchist who says,
Let the seas boil. Let the stars fall.
Rather than using humanity's war against itself to replace one system with another, chaos merely seeks to raze the entire system to the ground. An implosionary anarchist's dream where the system built by the galaxy's wars is entirely done away with. For Khorne, the resistance is brutal and forward-facing, the slamming of chainswords and fists into the face of his enemies to set autonomy and freedom as the status quo, no matter how bloody it may be. For Nurgle, the resistance is ironic. The rotting, dying Imperium can never last forever, no matter how long they hold out. The Grandfather's pushback against this system is a twisting of the truth, revealing mankind's end as inevitable. For Tzeentch, the resistance is subversive. Humanity screams honor, loyalty, and righteousness, but its systems are built on blood, lies, and secrecy for fear of collapse. The Great Changer of Ways seeks to use those weaknesses against the system itself. For Slaanesh, the resistance is personal. The Imperium detests all forms of hedonisy, but the Prince of Pleasure acts like a teenage girl in a Puritan household. Slaanesh wants you to dye your hair, get a spiky wristlet, or even get a septum piercing. It's the personal defiance of rules and order that are put in place to control the populace. Now, there's the double irony here that the Chaos Gods themselves are also all controlling over their minions, making them a different kind of system. But for today, we're focusing on the rebellious forces against the Imperium of Man specifically. The kind of thing that leads entire worlds into Astartes and Primarchs to abandon the system and take up arms with the Chaos Gods instead. Now, if the Chaos Gods are an interpersonal inversion on the warpunk established by the Imperium of Mankind, how do the Xenos factions in Warhammer fit into the fray? Well, they act as an external force working in opposition from the Imperium. So let's break them down one by one and see just how they reflect from humanity's domineering forces. Starting with the Tyranids. Now, on the aesthetic level, the Tyranids are pretty standard biopunk, using advanced biotechnologies to enforce their ideological purview. Evolution of the strongest, fastest, and bestest leads into the future. Where humanity's system clings to the past, the Tyranids reject the past, always changing, always evolving, eating through the present so they can survive into tomorrow. They are the natural world weaponized, and while war is the standard affair for natural species to dominate one another, there is no cruelty in the way that the Tyranids fight. Of course, yes, when you're a guardsman having small parasitic aliens eat through your skin, it might feel cruel, but the Tyranids don't design for cruelty, they design for efficiency. And in the case of warpunk, where overwhelming force is often the most effective way to spread across the stars, that cruelty becomes a tool of warfare that is inverted onto humanity, an external response to the operation of the system. There is no measured ideology, no cruelty, no personal connection to the Imperium, just a literal, natural rejection of the Imperium system and the others that get in their way. The Orks are pure chaos. Well, not chaos, but chaos. They're the crust punk squatters of the galaxy, obsessed with violence, noise, and building tanks out of scrap and spite. They don't care about doctrine, they just want a good scrap, and ironically that makes them freer than anyone else. Their whole existence mocks the Imperium's obsession with control by showing you can get by just fine with duct-taped mushrooms and a dream. They exist here in this framework to be a foil to the Imperium in terms of chaos, but unlike the Great Game, which seeks to burn the system down and replace it with its own, the Orks are simply here to burn everything for the sake of burning it. Anarchists to the true extreme, with that gritty, dirty diesel punk flair, which even matches the Imperium on an aesthetic lens. Mankind uses massive machines of war to enforce their control and order. The Orks use massive machines, or well, massive pieces of sheet metal welded together, to bring through their freedom to wage war against the galaxy. A type of rebellion born of their ideologies, not that the Orks themselves would ever recognize it. The Orks are the most authentic punks in Warhammer 40k, mainly because they just can't decide to be anything else.
I maintains, as I've always maintained, that pure, unmitigated chaos, that is, the total abandonment of strategical cohesion, is the truest expression of a proper war. And I respectfully disagree, Boris, you tin-headed knob. Chaos without direction is just a bunch of lads punching each other in the face for no reason. Fun, sure, but inefficient. We need coordinated pandemonium. See? A symphony of savagery conducted by the loudest git. Ha! Symphonies is for humies in big hats. What we need is carnal spontaneosity. War ain't about plans, it's about feeling the moment, letting the dagger guide your soul. Oh, so now you're talking about soul, are you? Since when did you grow a squig for philosophy, Boris? Look, controlled chaos means we hit more humans, crumb more tanks, and build taller, louder effigies with more skulls on them. But then it ain't chaos no more, is it? It's order with extra steps. Might as well call yourself an inquisitor, you zogging bureaucrat. Oi, take that back or I'll debate you to the ground, you pompous git. Debate me? You ain't got the vocabularistics to out-argufly Big Blaster Boris, the Grand Orctorial of Dhaka Valley. Right then, first to 30 crumbed humies gets to define the terms of the next war. Agreed, but if I win, we've renamed the tank Chaos Manifested. Like I said last week, still a stupid name. Still a winning name, you get?
Onto our next alien empire, we have the Tau, the somewhat utilitarian cassette retro-futuristic empire which fights for the greater good, with stark paint jobs that stand out in a battlefield and an ideology that directly acts in opposition to the Imperium's constant, unsatiated lust for blood. The Tau act as a kind of what-if, as they gather allies in a coalition through diplomacy and organization, rather than iron-fisted control of the Imperium. I mean, minus the brainwashing, but that is the threat of counterculture. That being the threat of someone else hijacking a well-meaning movement for their own devices. Necrons aren't so much another punk inversion on the Imperium as much as they are another regime that is temporarily embarrassed on the galactic scale. We know that if the Necron Empire was raised to full strength, they could probably challenge all of Chaos and the Emperor at the same time, but they're so far behind that coming back to their old status is tantamount to impossible. Being the literal children of Earth alongside the rest of the Imperium, the Squats, or Space Dwarves of 40k, act as a literal example of humanity breaking free from the greater Empire, and surviving, if not thriving, without it. To me, regardless of their subservience to the AI cores, or their visibly different genetic history that has shifted far from regular humanity, they are a kind of proof that humanity can make it in the Milky Way without giving life and limb to the unfeeling Imperium, a kind of claiming independence from the regime. If the Imperium of Man is a militarized cathedral slowly rusting over its own dogma, the Eldar are the doomed art school anarchists lighting incense in the ruins of their own civilization. They're post-punk, a civilization that already rebelled against the galaxy system, paid the price, and now drifts through the ashes making weird high-concept psychic music no one else can really hear. They don't wage war for conquest, they wage war because they have to, because fate told them they would. They dance through battle like it's a performance piece, every movement choreographed in psychic symphony that could collapse at any moment. The craft worlds aren't building a new order, they're desperately trying to preserve the last one before it fades entirely. They are the ghosts of the better tomorrow, punk only in the sense that they've seen the end and refuse to let go. They are bound by fate, the rebels who rebel by knowing how the story ends and spitting in its face anyway. Where the Imperium tries to brute force control over chaos, the Eldar try to outdance it. And while their elegant armor and laser precision seem refined, underneath it is just a scream of, "We warned you." And if the Craftworld Eldar are the bitter poets of the Fallen Age, then the Drukhari are the goth punks in leather jackets snorting soul dust and carving obscenities into the walls of the galaxy's asylum. Where the Imperium suppresses pleasure, the Drukhari turn it into a religion of knives and excess. They are kind of shock punk, the ultra-violent provocateurs who don't want to overthrow the regime. They want to mock it, desecrate it, and make it suffer like they did. You know that one kid in class who gets detention just to prove a point? That's the Drukhari. Except they kidnapped the principal and are now running a blood opera out of his office. They represent the perversion of freedom, what happens when you shatter all the rules and decide pain is just another color on the palette. They took the psychic trauma of their entire species and said, cool, let's build a city that feeds on agony and call it art. Imagine a universe where every planet is scarred by the same unending anthem of gunfire and blade, where the glory of victory tastes like ash and even the victors can't remember why they fought in the first place. That is hammerpunk, warpunk. The bitter poetry of soldiers who keep marching into the void, not because they believe in conquest, but because stopping would mean admitting there's nothing left to win. It's the defiant echo in ruined halls, the stubborn heartbeat under the shattered banners, the whispered dare. Keep swinging, even if the bell never tolls. Here, war isn't a byproduct of civilization, it is the civilization. It's the blood-lined circuit powering every cog in the machine, the only constant in a galaxy of shifting alliances and dying stars. And while every other faction riffs off humanity's war-driven blueprint, twisting it, subverting it, or burning it down entirely, none so completely embody the system as the Imperium itself. They are both conductor and orchestra, charting the symphony of slaughter that every other punk fights against or becomes. Yet, for all its tyranny, the Imperium's greatest legacy is unintentional, the sparks in the darkness that refuse to be snuffed out. Whether in neon glow psychers, bone weavers of agony, or Xenos horrors that eat worlds, each rebellion is a note of discord against the hammer's strike. They don't fight for anything. They fight because nothing else feels possible. And in that endless clash we discover the true rebellion of hammerpunk. War without purpose, waged for the sake of breaking the cycle itself. You ever wonder if it's all just pointless?
Pointless? Huh. A peculiar notion, Hume. You mean all the crumping, shooting, and generally enthusiastic exploding?
Yeah, the endless fighting, the screaming, watching your mates get eaten or mind-warped or purged for thinking wrong.
Aye, it do get a bit noisy sometimes.
My whole regiment's gone. Burned a village full of kids because someone coughed near a psyker. My commissar tried to shoot me for blinking too slow. I don't even know what I'm fighting for anymore.
Fancy that. I ask myself a similar thing every while, too. You see, the boys think it's all fun and fighting, but all snagwort. I says, what is the point of war, if not to make something better afterward?
Exactly.
But then I remember, when there's no war, the boys start arguing, stabbing each other. Someone paints the cup green wrong. It's chaos. Structured chaos, mine, but still.
We're trapped then. You fight because peace makes you bored. I fight because peace makes the Imperium paranoid.
Maybe war's the one thing the galaxy actually agrees on.
You know, this was kind of nice.
Aye, good chinwag. but you are a human.
Wait,
And I am feeling a bit grumpy. Bit of philosophy and the good stuff. What a cultured evening.
And with that, a big thank you to everyone who watched, and let me know what you thought of the video down below. Of course, another big thank you to members and patrons who help me continue to make new videos. If you're unaware, you can become a member for just $1 a month and get early access to member-exclusive polls, to vote for which videos come first, to get videos early, and more behind the scenes. As always, stay cool, have fun, and be awesome. Buster out.